Chapter 91 New Blessing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the same time, Dragonstone, under the dim night, a beautiful figure slipped out of the castle, sneaking around, carefully came to the beach. Compared with a few days ago, spears were stuck upside down in the shallows where the tide emerged, forming a new scenery. Through the faint moonlight, one could vaguely see the ferocious head stuck on the spears. There are dragon guards, dragon warriors, guards. Xianyin glanced at it and walked towards a secluded beach. There was a small boat parked. Robert stood aside and saw the beautiful figure in the distance. He immediately stepped forward and said, "Princess, the ship is ready, but you." "I know what I am doing, Lord Robert." Xianyin interrupted what he wanted to say, revealing Rhaegar's tired face in the moonlight. Rhaegar stepped onto the boat and said with firm eyes, "Rhaegar has been missing for many days. There is no news about my father. I have to go back to King's Landing to find my dragon." "Princess, Prince Rhaegar is accompanied by a dragon, so the situation may not be as bad as imagined." Robert wanted to persuade him again. Rhaegar shook her head and sighed, "I've waited long enough." With that said, he motioned to the sailors to push the boat into the sea and row towards the big ship on the sea. On the other side, inside the castle, Viserys was lying on his side on the bed, fast asleep. Suddenly, his gentle brows wrinkled and his lips wriggled slightly. He had a dream. In the dream, a fire rose from King's Landing and spread in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it spread across the 7 kingdoms. In the raging fire, the figure of a young man emerged. The young man was driving a jet-black dragon, with silver-gold hair flying, and wielding a long sword and a spear. In front of them, countless enemies swarmed, but no one is the enemy of the young man. Either he was buried in dragon flames, or he was killed by swords and guns. Baptized by blood and fire, the young man wore a dark crown. Viserys recognized it immediately. It was the crown that Aegon the Conqueror had worn when he was crowned. The fire continued to rage. The boy's face gradually became clearer. Viserys narrowed his eyes, desperately trying to see what the other person looked like. Finally, a very familiar face came into view. "Rhaegar!" Viserys subconsciously exclaimed. Plop. Viserys sat up straight on the bed and was awakened by a cry from his sleep. He was breathing heavily, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Rhaegar, that must be Rhaegar." Viserys calmed down for a while before breaking away from the dream and recalling what he saw in the dream. He could never mistake the young man's face. It was his eldest son Rhaegar Targaryen. Only then did he remember. The only remaining black dragon on this continent is the king of wild dragons, Gluttony, controlled by the eldest son. Viserys' eyes were blurry. Mo fumbled around on the bedside, taking the wine glass and bottle. He took a sip and his agitated mood calmed down. Dong dong. At this time, there was a knock on the door, and the voice of Captain Harold of the King's Guard rang out. "Your Majesty, are you awake?" Viserys raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead, and said with a tired voice, "Yes, a dream." Crunch. The door opened from the outside. Harold walked in, and said worriedly, "Your Majesty, your sleep has been very bad recently." "It's okay, this dream is different." Viserys took a sip of the wine glass, and an inexplicable brilliance burst out in his eyes. "This is the dream I have been pursuing so hard, and I finally found it." In his words, the tiredness was suppressed by the thick excitement. With excitement, Harold frowned in confusion before hearing Viserys continue. "Sir, prepare a grand banquet. I have a feeling my child is coming home." "Your Majesty, Prince Rhaegar hasn't been found yet. I'm afraid it's inappropriate." Harold tried to persuade him. Viserys' expression changed drastically and he said seriously, "No. My child is back. He is the prophesied prince. He was born with blood and fire. His Majesty." Harold was speechless for a moment, not knowing what to say. In his opinion, the king may have missed him too much and was a little confused. Viserys did not dwell on the problem and instead asked, "How did the investigation go?" "The dragons and dragon guards on the island have been cleaned up, and several hidden secret passages have been discovered in the castle, which contain traces of recent activities." At this point, Harold looked hesitant. "One of the secret passages leads to the queen's bedroom." "Alicent." Viserys looked startled, then said, "Do you suspect that the queen was involved in the murder of Rhaegar?" "This possibility cannot be ruled out." No one can draw a conclusion until substantial evidence is found. Harold analyzed objectively. Viserys closed his eyes after hearing this, his face showed no emotion or anger, and seemed to be brewing emotions. After a while, he opened his eyes and gritted his teeth and said, "Secretly send someone to monitor Alicent's every move. If there are any clues, report them to me immediately." "Yes, Your Majesty." Harold nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to leave, the door knocked from outside and Robert's voice came. "Your Majesty, the princess sneaked out of the castle and returned to King's Landing by boat." "Bastard! Who gave her the courage to disobey my orders?" Viserys roared and cursed loudly. "Inform the Maester Raven to send a message. As soon as Rhaenyra appears in King's Landing, she will be placed under house arrest immediately." "Yes, my lord." Robert was startled, shivering outside the door, and hurried away. There's only so much he can do. Both sides fulfilled their responsibilities, but both sides felt cowardly. The next day, at dawn, Rhaegar nestled in the big bed and was woken up by the system prompt. "This exploration is over, please pick up the lost treasures." Rhaegar stood up with a start and opened his eyes blankly. Under him was a red paint mask. "The exploration is complete." Rhaegar murmured vaguely and brought up the system panel. "Curse Mask of the Son of Shadow, exploration progress, 100%. Seeing the 2 lines of small words, Rhaegar suddenly became energetic and recalled the battle that took place last night. He discovered a way to kill the shadow monster, use the Shadowbinder's head to complete the body of the headless figure, and defeat it with the token mask. He lowered his head and glanced at the bed. In addition to the red paint mask, there is also a purple halo. Rhaegar rubbed his little face, tried to smile, and stretched out his finger to poke the halo. The relic was picked up successfully, under detection. The test was successful and it was determined to be an epic relic, a blessing from the King of Light. With a clang, a black iron token carved with a flaming red heart fell. Rhaegar picked up the token and looked at it repeatedly. "Blessing type, is it similar to White Deer's blessing?" Rhaegar murmured softly, checking the text prompt of the token. "The power of God is hidden within, don't underestimate it, it will reveal miracles when you need it." Rhaegar read it silently, and then kept the token carefully. It is not difficult to see that this token has not yet been used. Perhaps there will be an opportunity to trigger this relic in the future. Get up, get up." After muttering a few words, Rhaegar got dressed. The shadow monster is dealt with. His adventure on the peninsula also came to an end, and it was time to return to Dragonstone to reunite with his family. The plot of Peninsula is officially over and returns to the main plot. Reading the comments backstage these days, I burst into tears, which is very uncomfortable. Chapter 92 Saitiga. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dreadhole Castle. The glutton's huge body lay on the ground to rest, and the air flow between breath and breath set off a heat wave. Rhaegar walked to the dragon's head, stared at its closed vertical pupils, and stroked the dragon's kiss that restrained its fangs. He asked doubtfully, "Glutton, are you in a bit of a slump today?" Hiss. The glutton's throat rolled up and down, he neighed and shook his head. Rhaegar read its meaning. "It feels like its body is full of power. It didn't vent well enough last night. I'm very disappointed." Rhaegar shook his head and laughed. "Don't worry, wait until we return to Dragonstone Island to vent our anger on the 2 dragons." After spending many days together, the bond between them became even deeper. Rhaegar was confident that with the full power of Glutton, he could defeat Vermithor and the severely damaged Silver Wing. One person and one dragon were chatting, and a group of figures approached. Rhaegar turned around and saw Sam, Barbat, Sapphire. They stared at the dark dragon carefully, stopping a few meters away from Rhaegar. They all knelt down. Rhaegar asked strangely, "What are you doing?" Sam said, "Prince. You led us to defeat the evil curse. I hope you can lead us in the future." Barbat followed and said, "My brother has made a big mistake. I don't dare to hope to win the king's forgiveness. I only ask that you accept the loyal city of the Brun family and let us atone for our sins by your side." Rhaegar glanced at them, his eyes falling on Baolan. "This girl hit the Shadowbinder's shadow with an arrow last night and achieved great success." Rhaegar thought for a while and said gently, "I promised Falcon to take care of his tribe. I will take away all the remnants of the Peregrine Falcon tribe." What can you do? Baolan raised her head, her pretty face full of determination, and said loudly, Prince, you have worked hard for the peninsula, you should not abandon the results and leave. Result? Rhaegar didn't know why. Baolan said calmly, you solved the curse and saved the residents of the peninsula. You should gather everyone and accept their kneeling. Then what? Rhaegar felt it was unnecessary. You will gain the common allegiance of the peninsula nobles and savages, become the first hero to integrate the peninsula in the past century, and return to your family with honor. Baolan spoke logically. Rhaegar opened his mouth, wanting to refuse. Sam persuaded from the side, Prince, the residents of the peninsula are waiting for you, you should meet them. Rhaegar frowned slightly and walked up to the city wall under their leadership. Outside the city wall, the Brun family, the Kleb family, the Savage army, even many small noble families that I had seen before were among them. The moment they saw Rhaegar appear on the city wall, everyone fell to their knees and looked up at him. Although no one spoke, the silence was deafening. Seeing this scene, Rhaegar was slightly distracted. As a young man, he looked back at Sam and the others and asked, are they loyal to me? Yes, hero of the peninsula, Prince of Targaryen. Sam and others responded in unison, kneeling down on one knee again and lowering their heads. Rhaegar pursed her lips and said helplessly, let them get up, I'm leaving. Prince, I beg you to accept the allegiance of the nobles. Prince, you appointed Crab Claws to fight for you, and they still obey your orders. There was a long silence. Rhaegar nodded and said, get up, I accept your allegiance. He thought about last night's triumphant moment. Everyone looked at him, their eyes full of admiration and respect, which was something he had never experienced before. Look at the current situation, it's hard to refuse such hospitality. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard the prince's answer. Soon, under Barbot's arrangement, the nobles of all sizes on the peninsula were summoned to the living room of Terror Cave Castle. Together they knelt before the young prince, offered their swords and loyalty, and swore allegiance. Give up. Baolan led Trangel, the representative of Crabclaw, and asked to meet. This 2-meter-tall savage man who looked like a giant bear said in a low voice, Prince, some of the free people want to return to the wilderness, and 1,000 people want to follow you out. Rhaegar nodded lightly and ordered, counting the remnants of the Peregrine tribe and the families of these 1,000 people, how many free people are there in total? That he didn't refuse, although I look down on these silly savages, but regardless of denial, they did obey his orders, even at the cost of their lives. It deserves his attention. It is conservatively estimated that there will be 2,000 people, and women and children will account for a large proportion. Baolan reported neatly. If we want to take away 2,000 people, we need a big ship. Rhaegar raised a difficult question. Baolan said, the peninsula nobles only have small boats, but I know where you can borrow big boats. Tell me about it. Rhaegar asked. Baolan lowered his head and said in a low voice, the Celtigar family of Crab Island. This family has been loyal to the Targaryen dynasty for generations. They are rooted in the sea and have a good maritime fleet. Are you from Celtica? Seeing her resistant look, Rhaegar became interested. Baolan lowered his head even lower and gritted his teeth. Yes, Bartimaeus Saitiga is my father. He gave birth to me with a fisherman's daughter. Then why did you end up living on Crab Claw Peninsula? Rhaegar asked softly. Bartimaeus looks down on illegitimate children and doesn't care about our lives. Tormund and I were born from different women. Destiny made us meet and wander around on a cargo ship doing odd jobs. Once a cargo ship capsized while out at sea. Tormund and I were washed away by the waves to the Crab Claw Peninsula and were taken in by a hunting Uncle Falcon. As Baolan spoke, her calloused hands clenched tightly, her tone full of indignation at fate. I understand. Rhaegar sighed and said, I will go to Crab Island to borrow a boat, and you can organize the free people to leave together. Another illegitimate child drama. Rhaegar didn't like it and didn't want to ask more questions, just to rub salt into other people's wounds. Rhaegar drove the glutton and soared towards Crab Island. Crab Island is an island located on the east side of Crab Claw Peninsula. It is very close to Whispering Castle. At the speed of a glutton, we can easily cross the Middle Sea and reach Crab Island in 10 minutes. Crab Island is quite large, and its lord is the Saitiga family, the Celtigar family. Like the Valerian family, followed the Targaryens in migrating from ancient Valyria to the continent of Westeros. The family members have the characteristics of Valyrian descendants with silver hair and purple eyes. The Saitiga family is very loyal and has been loyal to the Targaryen family for generations until now. Rhaegar hovered over Crab Island on his glutton, overlooking the town below, on the rolling hills. A tall castle was built. This is it. Rhaegar patted the glutton on the back and signaled it to land outside the castle. Hiss. The glutton circled the castle and breathed out a breath of dragon flames, announcing the arrival of the wild dragon king. Boom, the huge dragon body landed outside the castle, causing a wave of air. The glutton stood up straight, its thick neck stretched out, and its ferocious dragon head surpassed the city wall, blocking thousands of troops. The arrival of a giant dragon immediately caused a huge sensation on Crab Island. When the glutton landed, the guards on the city wall were all frightened, holding on to their faith and running away without turning around. Rhaegar sat on the dragon's back, almost eye level with the guards guarding the city. He said calmly, "Go and ask your lord to come out and tell him that the Targaryen prince has arrived. It will be on the shelves next Friday. I hope everyone who sees it will be rewarded with a first order on that day." Crab. Chapter 93, Meeting Leonor by Chance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yes, please wait. The guard captain was dressed in iron armor. He looked at the huge glutton in fear and hurriedly ran down the city wall. However, the arrival of the dragon is obviously eye-catching enough. The castle gate has been opened. A group of attendants walked out in 2 rows, lowering their heads and not daring to look at the majesty of the dragon in the distance. Walking among the attendants were several nobles in rich costumes. The leader was an old man with a serious face. The old man's hair color is the silver color of traditional Valyrian descendants, with sparse hair remaining on the top of his head. The loose skin caused the corners of the eyes to droop, and a pair of green eyes shone with a shrewd light. The group of people walked out quickly but without losing their manners, until the city gate opened. He stopped at the city gate and looked at the prince on the dragon's back. "Glutton, put me down," Rhaegar said softly. Hiss. The glutton roared and crawled down, allowing the driver to slide off the dragon's back. The 2 sides kept a distance of 100 meters. The people on the other side did not dare to approach the dragon and stood in front of the city gate to greet him. Rhaegar slowly walked over, looking at the group of people, and suddenly his eyes lit up. He saw a familiar face. "The 7 gods have blessed me and allowed me to meet the prince here. It's great." Before Rhaegar could say anything, a round body squeezed out from the opposite side, and he quickly stepped forward with an excited expression. Rhaegar smiled and said in surprise, "Lord Leonor, why are you here?" That the other party was none other than Leonor Strong, the former prime minister. Because Leonor was walking too fast, the fat on his belly trembled slightly, and he couldn't hide his joy. "Prince, it's great that you are okay. I have been looking for traces of you on the sea during this time." Since Rhaegar's dragon disappeared, Leonor was sent to search around the narrow sea. He had just visited Titlehead Island where the Valerian family was located not long ago. Unexpectedly, the Saitiga family who were visiting Crab Island today met Rhaegar by chance. As soon as the two met, Leonor bent down with difficulty and pulled Rhaegar to look around, as if checking for any injuries. Rhaegar chuckled and said, "I'm fine. My dragon landed on the Crab Claw Peninsula to recuperate after being injured. It was just a few days ago." He didn't lie. The glutton was indeed seriously injured, and it was true that he had just returned a few days ago. It's just that he experienced a lot of stories during this period, and the ending was very twisty. After careful calculation, he only left Dragonstone Island for less than 10 days. Seeing that the prince was not injured, Leonor was greatly relieved. "Prince, you have been missing for so long and there is no news. The king and princess are very worried about your safety." "I'm sorry. There are some things that have hindered my trip. I want to return as soon as I solve it." Lay was even more moved when he heard that his father and sister had worked so hard for it. "It's great news that you're okay." Leonor stood up straight, led Rhaegar to the city gate, and introduced carefully, "This is the Lord of Crab Island, the patriarch of the Saitiga family, Lord Bartimus Saitiga. And one of your father's most loyal vassals." Rhaegar looked at the white-haired old man and nodded obediently. "Greetings to you, Lord Bartimus." The old man always kept a smile and saluted. it's an honor for you to come to Crab Island as a guest, Prince." After saying that, he stepped aside, guided the direction of the castle, and said softly, "You are a guest from afar. Please enter the castle for a brief introduction." "My pleasure, my lord." Rhaegar smiled slightly and followed Leonor into the castle. As a famous maritime family, the Saitiga family, like the Valerian family, initially made its fortune by collecting taxes from passing ships. Later, a powerful fleet was formed, and maritime trade began, making a fortune. The hard work of just a few generations has made a lot of money. As soon as Rhaegar entered the castle, he felt the strong financial resources of the Saitiga family. The hall is covered with precious mere carpets. The windows are made of Volantis glass, and the walls are decorated with gold and silver carvings. Rhaegar glanced at it and had only one thought in his mind. "You're so rich." Bartimaeus was a face-loving nobleman. Seeing that the prince was attracted by the decoration of the castle, a proud smile appeared on his lips. "Prince, forgive me for not holding a grand enough welcome banquet for you. But in order to welcome Lord Leonor, the kitchen has prepared a good reception banquet. I hope you won't dislike it." Bartimaeus had no shortage of ostentatious regrets. Rhaegar didn't ask much for this. He is here for business, not just a guest. While the attendants were preparing for the banquet, Bartimaeus chatted with Rhaegar and Leonor. Leonor mentioned what happened on Dragonstone after Rhaegar disappeared. Many dragon guards and Huanlong people were raided and had their heads chopped off because of suspicion. Rhaenyra quarreled with her father several times, quarreling about returning to King's Landing and riding a dragon on the sea to search for traces of Rhaegar. Rhaegar also recounted his experiences on the peninsula during this period. The two thoughtful adults who listened were stunned for a moment, not expecting such a bizarre experience. In particular, the curse of the Shadowbinder and the magic of the forest which deeply stimulated their old-fashioned thinking. Bartimaeus was full of doubt and said in disbelief, "Prince, are you saying that magic is real and has invaded the Crabclaw Peninsula?" "Obviously." Rhaegar shrugged. Leonor said more tactfully, "Prince, magic has disappeared for many years, and most people think it is a legend. In a few years, if the dragon unfortunately becomes extinct, will the world think it is a legend?" Rhaegar asked innocently. "Well." Both of them were stunned and didn't know how to answer. Bartimaeus put his hands on his hands and smiled. "Yes, the prince is right. When I was young, I traveled by boat on both sides of the narrow sea and encountered many thrilling adventures." Rhaegar sat on the couch and said sincerely, "My lord, I came to Crab Island this time to borrow a ship to transport the free people who follow me. Please help me generously." "No problem, but—" Bartimaeus looked hesitant and glanced at Leonor, who was silent. When people from the royal family opened their mouths, it was natural for them to borrow a boat to transport something as trivial as this, but what they were transporting was a group of peninsula savages. He didn't dare to agree casually. Following his line of sight, Rhaegar looked at Leonor and said, "If you don't believe it, you can follow me to the Crabclaw Peninsula to argue the truth. The nobles there have sworn allegiance to me." As soon as these words came out, the scene suddenly froze. Leonor raised his head, his eyes flashing with unknown light. A pair of brown eyes seemed to look right through Rhaegar. Bartimaeus lowered his head in deep thought, recalling his experience of contacting the peninsula nobles. They were a group of savage and arrogant nobles. A disagreement can easily lead to a fight and start a war between two or even several families. Because the land is barren, the kingdom has little management. Most of the time, the nobles of the peninsula were allowed to act recklessly and beat them to death. This also resulted in the soldiers under the peninsula's nobles being very powerful and difficult to deal with. If the prince in front of him really gains the allegiance of the peninsula nobles, it will be equivalent to recruiting an army with considerable combat power. What's more, there is a group of savages following him, also a good cannon fodder team. Rhaegar will grow older, but not until he returns to King's Landing. Thanks to Chun Lai for the 1666 reading point for the picture reward. Thanks to the 2 digital book friends for the 100-point reward. Chapter 94 Reunion at Sea. You are listening at NovelFold.audio. Before Leonor could say anything, Bartimaeus solemnly said, "Prince, the Saitiga family has always been loyal to the royal family and will not let you down. Borrowing a boat is a small matter, but winning the favor of the king's eldest son is a big deal. Crab Island is only a few hours sailing time from Dragonstone. if you control a giant dragon to fly, the time required will only be shorter. Instead of refusing, the prince returned to Dragonstone to prepare his ship. It's better to just agree. Rhaegar didn't understand the twists and turns, but he felt that Bartimaeus had some expectations for him, but he didn't care. The small face suppressed the smile and said seriously, "Thank you for your assistance, sir." Bartimaeus' smile did not fade and he said, "I immediately ordered the ship to be prepared and headed to the Crabclaw Peninsula." Only then did Leonor come out of his thoughts. He looked at Bartimaeus inexplicably, lowered his head slightly, and kept a low profile. With the political sensitivity he has cultivated over the years, he sensed that the prince's return to Dragonstone would cause quite a disturbance. At this time, it is not suitable for him to stand out too much. 2 days later, 3 barks set sail from Crabclaw Peninsula. The ship was filled with ragged wildlings and headed towards Dragonstone. Hiss! The sharp dragon roar resounded through the sky, and a pair of overwhelming wings enveloped the sky above the 3 ships, and instantly rushed into the sky. Rhaegar stood on the deck, looking out at the blue sea. Leonor came up from behind and whispered, "Prince, the raven brought news last night. The princess returned to King's Landing privately and was taken back to the Red Castle by the King's Guard for custody. Is she trying to control a dragon to find me?" Rhaegar thought of Silax where Rhaenyra was kept in the dragon's lair. "Yes, since the dragon disaster that night, the princess has been thinking about food and tea," Leonor said softly. "When I see my father, I will ride the dragon back to King's Landing to find Rhaenyra." Rhaegar smiled. There are so many benefits to owning a dragon, at least on the road. It's incredibly fast. Hiss! Suddenly, an angry dragon roar came from above. Rhaegar raised his head and saw the glutton breaking through the clouds, flapping his huge wings, and staring into the distance as if in warning. Hiss! It was answered by another high-pitched dragon roar, whose voice was far less rich than that of the gluttonous one. 2 dragon roars alarmed the people on the 3 sailboats. Both freemen and sailors walked out of the cabin one after another and looked at the sky where the dragon roared. Soon, in everyone's sight, a golden dragon flew from a distance. Riding on the back of the giant dragon was a girl wearing a black dragon-controlling uniform. The moment he saw the golden dragon, Rhaegar couldn't help but be excited. When Rhaegar noticed the girl on the dragon's back, he was surprised and shouted, "Rhaenyra!" Rhaenyra on the dragon's back did not hear his cry, but was attracted by the glutton. This adult black dragon is Rhaegar's newly tamed wild dragon. Rhaenyra cast her gaze towards the 3 large ships sailing below, expecting to see Rhaegar. Hiss! The glutton sensed the driver's excitement, put down his hostility towards the other dragon, and leaned down to glide to the sea level. Sharp claws split the waves, and the glutton rushed straight towards Rhaegar's ship. When it was about to collide, the dragon's head suddenly shot upward, and its huge body shot straight into the sky. The slender tail gently curled up Rhaegar, who was already waiting on the deck. Then he slowed down and placed the driver steadily on his back. As soon as he mounted the dragon's back, Rhaegar immediately drove the glutton into the air, approaching Rhaenyra in mid-air. Hiss! An adult dragon that was much larger than itself came towards him. Syrax, who was covered in golden scales, twisted uneasily and hissed in warning. The glutton's movements were large enough for Rhaenyra to see. Especially seeing Rhaegar's figure, he was even more excited and exclaimed, "Rhaegar!" She stroked Syrax's scales, speaking High Valyrian to calm him down. Soon, Rhaegar rode the dragon into the air. Rhaenyra also drove Syrax closer. For a moment, 2 dragons, one black and one gold, faced off in the air. Rhaegar and Rhaenyra were riding on their respective dragons, looking at each other from the distance. Rhaenyra's hair was messy, her eyes were red and swollen, her face was indescribably haggard, and she stared at Rhaegar unblinkingly. Rhaegar! She wanted to say something, but didn't know where to start. Rhaegar also looked at her, his eyes full of joy of reunion, and said in surprise, "Rhaenyra, you are not imprisoned in the Red Keep. Why are you here?" Rhaenyra sniffed, trying her best to maintain her eldest sister's demeanor, and said in a hoarse voice, "I want to find you, but they can't stop me yet." Rhaegar was very moved when he heard this. After carefully examining her face, I realized that Rhaenyra was in poor condition. Compared to a few days ago, his eyes were full of fatigue and red bloodshot eyes. Rhaegar opened her mouth and called softly, "Sister." Rhaenyra's eyes turned red and she said seriously, "Go back with me, Rhaegar." Of course, I miss you guys. Rhaegar obeyed everything, like a well-behaved child. Rhaegar glared, and drove Syrax to turn around and fly towards Dragonstone. Glutton, let's follow. Rhaegar smiled and followed with the glutton, soaring among the clouds and surrounding Syrax. The two dragons are very different in age, and even more so in size. In front of the gluttons, Syrax is not even half his size. In order not to scare Rhaegar's dragon, Rhaegar did not dare to get too close. But he was still happy. This was the first time that he and his sister rode a dragon together. Soon, the two men and two dragons left the big ship behind and rushed to Dragonstone Island ahead of schedule. Syrax, who had been terrified of the gluttons all the way, eagerly landed on the cliff next to the beach. Rhaegar kept his eyes on Rhaenyra. Seeing her land, I wanted to follow her. Unexpectedly, the glutton shook his head and refused to land. It spread its wings and hovered in the sky. Rhaegar immediately understood that there were two malicious adult dragons on Dragonstone that hated the gluttons. Thinking of what happened in the last dragon fight, Rhaegar couldn't help but feel his heart beat faster, but he was mentally prepared. He patted the glutton on the back and murmured, "Come on, man, do whatever you want." That the glutton licked his nose, spread his wings wildly, raised his head high, and dragon flames brewed in his throat. Hiss. The next second, the glutton let out a roar that resounded throughout Dragonstone, and dragon flames pierced the blue sky, announcing the return of the wild dragon king. Hiss, hiss. Following its roar, two other dragon roars immediately sounded in Dragonstone Island, all filled with provoked anger. Rhaegar sat on the dragon's back, overlooking the rugged island below, waiting for his opponent who had been away for many days. Not long after, two giant dragons of different colors rushed out of Longshan and headed straight into the sky. It was bronze in color, with vertical pupils filled with rage, and its body was comparable to that of a glutton, a light green one, with a large piece of flesh missing from its neck, one wing drooping weakly, struggling to lift into the air. It was Wormizar and Silverwing. Rhaenyra loved her brother deeply, and Rhaegar loved his sister deeply. The first time the siblings dance with a dragon is a key scene. Chapter 95 The Dragons Rise Again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Enemies are extremely jealous when they meet. When the two giant dragons rose into the sky, they immediately roared at the gluttons and breathed out dragon flames. The glutton flapped his wings and looked at the other person humanely with his vertical pupils. Unlike the glutton who ate swamp marigolds and recovered from his injuries, Silverwing's injury was even more serious, and he could only huddle in his lair and wait for himself to heal. A few days would not be enough to recover as before. As Rhaegar saw, at this moment, Eni was struggling to even fly, relying solely on his anger, which was not enough to pose a threat. Therefore, there is only one opponent today, Fury of Bronze, Wormizar. Hiss. Just as the three giant dragons were confronting each other, two dragon roars sounded again. One side came from the cliff, and it was Rhaenyra who took Salaxon into the sky. One party came from the strange rock mountains. A large brown dragon rushed out of an unknown cave and watched the four dragons in the sky warily, but it showed no sign of getting closer. He just stopped on a rock in the distance and observed with fury. Rhaegar glanced over and recognized the dragon, wild dragon, sheep thief, an adult mud dragon of similar age to Caraxi who often eats the sheep of the island herders. The other party was obviously alerted by several dragon roars and came out to observe the situation. Don't pay too much attention to it. Meanwhile, Syrax flew to Glutton's side. Rhaenyra was almost shoulder to shoulder with Rhaegar, looking annoyed. Rhaegar, what are you doing? Are you addicted to fighting with dragons? Rhaegar said firmly, Glutton is the king of wild dragons. It has its own pride. Wherever it fails, it has to get up. Then we can't use the dragon easily. Rhaenyra lectured him while staring nervously at Vermithor and Silverwing. She didn't understand Rhaegar's dangerous behavior, but she couldn't just sit back and watch. She had to step up and help him. Rhaegar analyzed. Silverwing is seriously injured and has not recovered. I just need to defeat Wormizar. Syrax has never fought, so I can be of limited help to you. Rhaenyra sighed deeply, her fingers turning white. Since becoming a dragon master, she has never been in combat. This time, even though he was teaching Rhaegar a lesson, he was also longing for a fierce collision in his heart. Rhaegar's heart was pounding and he raised the corners of his mouth. Just watching is enough. Gluttony and I are very strong. During the conversation, Wormizer and Silverwing couldn't hold it any longer, and sprayed dragon flames as they approached. "Protect yourself, Rhaegar!" Rhaegar shouted, driving the glutton to accelerate suddenly, spitting out green dragon flames and charging. Boom, the 3 dragon flames collided, causing terrible destructive power and setting off a scalding heat wave. Rhaegar lay on the dragon's back, clenching his scales, his eyes very excited. The first wave of dragon flames ended, and the glutton's speed did not slow down, and the second wave of dragon flames was quickly brewed. This dragon flame sprayed towards the larger Wormizer and hit its neck. Wormizer relied on his strong physical fitness to resist, his body stayed in mid-air, and he used his wings to scatter the dragon flames. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Gluttony attacked the silver wing behind it. Hiss! The ferocious dragon's kiss bit into the other side of Silver Wing's neck, causing it to howl miserably. "Glutton, behind you!" Rhaegar's order was issued, and the glutton finally did not bite Silver Wing's neck, but pulled it off the ground, turn and change positions to avoid the golden dragon flames sprayed from behind. Seeing that his partner was severely injured again, Wormizer was completely enraged. He spit out golden dragon flames as if for free, and chased the glutton to attack. The glutton was faster, nimbly dodging the dragon flames and diving into the clouds. Below, Ini fell heavily to the ground, the wound on his neck was filled with blood, and he screamed in pain. Hiss! The sheep thief who was watching from a distance screamed excitedly, flapping his wings and planning to have a feast. "Stop!" Rhaegar drove Syrax to stand in front of the sheep thief, scolding him in High Valyrian. She hated Vormuther and Silverwing for attacking the glutton and causing Rhaegar's whereabouts to remain unknown, but she knew better. Dragons are one of the Targaryens' most precious resources. Vormuther and Silverwing were once the mounts of her great-grandfathers, King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne. They have all made great contributions to the family. Rhaegar didn't order the glutton to kill Silverwing, and she couldn't turn a blind eye and let a precious adult dragon be eaten by his own kind. The sheep thief is older and a wild dragon. The size is no smaller than that of the bloodworm Khorrakshuf. Syrax was underage and half the size of the sheep thief. Rhaegar was very nervous. She drove Sylax and confronted the sheep thief, refusing to give in to each other. The sheep thief neighed a few times as if in demonstration, but did not take the initiative to attack. Syrax felt the emotions of the driver and roared angrily at the sheep thief, spreading his wings and ready to fight back at any time. Despite its small size, it has a very big temper. On the other hand, the sheep thief retreated silently when he saw that Syracuse was full of offensive intent. The fierce battle in the sky continues. The glutton rushed into the clouds and disappeared. Wormizer was blinded by anger and chased after him without even thinking. Clouds and fog covered the scene, and the vision was hazy for a moment. At this moment, a huge thing came from the flank and pounced on it quickly. Poof! The glutton revealed his figure, and the abyssal maw with intertwined fangs bit Vormizer's neck, and the hot dragon's blood sprayed out instantly. Hiss! The attack came so fast that Wormizer had no time to defend himself and could only struggle wildly, trying to break free. It's a pity that the glutton would give it a chance. The dragon kisses and bites tightly, its teeth sink deeply into the flesh, biting the flesh of the bronze beast. Vormizer roared in pain, flapped its wings against the glutton's head, and tore at its body with its claws. "Glutton, back off!" At this time, Rhaegar's order was issued. The glutton, who was aroused by the smell of blood, struggled for a moment, and then his rationality prevailed and he chose to obey the driver's instructions. It released the dragon's kiss, tore off a large piece of flesh, raised its head and swallowed it into its belly. Before Wormizer could counterattack, he kicked his opponent's belly with both claws and used the force to fly away. The bronze giant dragon was left alone, roaring angrily, dragging its neck with blood gushing out and barely flying. After roaring for a while, the glutton disappeared. Just when it thought its opponent was far away and relaxed its vigilance, a black shadow rushed out from below. This time, the gluttons hide beneath the clouds and attack from below. Click. The seriously injured Wormizer couldn't dodge in time, and was bitten on the shoulder blade of one wing, and there was a crisp sound of bone cracking. Wormizer roared in fright, ignoring the pain in his neck, and lowered his head to bite the glutton's neck. Dragon flame. Rhaegar struggled to hold onto the glutton's back and gave the order again. the glutton was accustomed to the driver's instructions, and immediately released the dragon's kiss, aiming at the wide-open mouth of Wormizer and spitting out dragon flames. Boom! The dragon flame hit Wormizer's head, and violent black smoke erupted. Wormizer was dizzy for a moment, his neck was weak and drooped, and a large stream of dragon blood gushed out from the wound. Fortunately, its defense is high enough. He regained consciousness in an instant and regained control of his body. Recalling the last dragon fight, the glutton fled in panic, which made many book friends unhappy. This time, the running-in period between Rhaegar and Gluttonous Eater has passed, and they should have a good record if they merge into one. Regarding the age of the protagonist, there will soon be a leap, and the plot must be completed for the time being. Thanks to Cave 13 for the 500 points reward, thanks to Jixiang Jiji for the 100 reading points. Chapter 96 Triumphal Dance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hiss. Wormizer roared to the sky, his anger igniting his reason, and his thick tail slapped the glutton's abdomen hard. The glutton suffered a heavy blow, and the clever one separated from him. Wormizer became angry and sprayed golden dragon flames at the glutton's back. Glutton, lower it. Rhaegar kept watching its movements and immediately gave orders. Gluttonous roared and dived headfirst, narrowly avoiding the dragon flames. The blow missed, and Wormizer wanted to catch up regardless of the injuries all over his body. However, one shoulder blade was shattered and the wings were unable to use force, forcing it to teeter in the air, making it difficult to fly. Dragon flame. Wormizer was still adjusting the balance, and Rhaegar's instructions had been sent. Relying on his speed, Gluttony surrounded Wormizer, whose speed was greatly reduced, and kept spitting out green dragon flames. For a moment, the gorgeous green color dipped into the clouds, creating a beautiful oil painting. Wormizer is indeed strong, with surprisingly strong strength and physique. Even though he was seriously injured, he still struggled to survive the glutton's repeated attacks. Waiting for an opportunity to counterattack, but it is destined not to wait. Rhaegar drove the glutton to circle back and forth, riding steadily on the dragon's back, staring at the helpless and furious bronze beast. Since losing the last dragon fight, he has often wondered about the reason. In addition to the fact that Vermiser and Silver Wings are more than less, they cooperate well. More often than not, gluttons get injured too quickly. The key to injury is fighting. Especially after the fierce battle with the Shadow Half-Dragon, he realized the importance of fighting, unless the dragon's size reaches a crushing victory. Otherwise, if any dragons of similar size fight together, the final result will be serious injury or even death. Dragons are violent, cruel creatures. Once the consumption of dragon flames turns to melee combat, claws and fangs are lethal weapons. Last time, if Greedy had not fought with Ini early and had his stomach ripped open, he would not have been defeated and fled so quickly. Combining the glutton's high speed and high-intensity dragon flame characteristics, Rhaegar drew up a plan: sneak attack. Gluttony is fast and can have a good first strike effect. As long as you inflict heavy damage on your opponent at the beginning, then let him do whatever he wants. Hiss. The glutton screamed arrogantly and spewed dragon flames around Wormizer. Each blast of dragonfire aggravates Vormithor's injuries and renders him confused. Below, with the roars of dragons and explosions coming from above, the sheep thieves on the ground gradually became restless. Greedily glanced at Ini lying in a pool of blood. The smell of blood deeply stimulated its appetite. Hiss. It flapped its wings and flew into the air again, shrouding Syrax in shadow, trying to force him to leave. Rhaegar looked up at this ugly mud head, fear flashed in her eyes, and said firmly, "Dragon flame." Hiss. Syrax had been waiting for a long time, and quickly rose into the air, spitting a golden dragon flame on the opponent's face. The sheep thief was caught off guard and shook his head comically to avoid the dragon's flames. This move also inspired its ferocity. As one of the few wild dragons on Dragonstone Island, sheep thieves are more popular among residents than gluttons. Even though the glutton is extremely large, its appearance is as sinister as an evil god, but it has always stayed away from the crowd. It only appears near Longshan occasionally and basically does not cause harm to humans. The sheep thief is an extreme. This mud dragon just likes to eat the sheep of herdsmen, and is even obsessed with the thrill of hunting sheep. Once someone blocks it, or touches it, will be attacked by dragon flames. It ranges from being burned, to being turned into a charred corpse. Every year, sheep thieves kill a certain number of people. Now, it was angered by the golden dragon in front of it. the sheep thief roared and sprayed orange dragon flames from his mouth. Its dragon flame is very different, it falls like mud dots and sprays over a wide area. Get away, Syrax. Faced with danger, Rhaegar reacted quickly, using Syrax to dodge, while counterattacking with dragonfire. Hiss. In the first battle, the young Syrax seemed very excited and neighed in a mighty manner. The golden dragon flame was like a pillar of fire, crushing the sheep thief's dragon flame. Unable to compete with the dragon flames, the sheep thief became more and more angry and flapped his wings toward Syrax, intending to win by virtue of his size advantage. Syrax is undersized, but fast and nimble enough. He quickly distanced himself from it, shouting and spitting out dragon flames, his figure as nimble as a petrel. The sheep thief failed to pursue him several times and growled in anger. Then, he pounced on the seriously injured Silver Wing. Its target has always been this adult dragon that has lost the ability to resist. Hiss. Silver Wing neighed in fear, and the pain in its neck made it difficult to move, so it could only flap its wings in warning. How could the sheep thief be afraid? He would fall next to it and open his huge mouth to bite it. Dragon Flame. Seeing that Silver Wing was about to die, Rhaegar looked anxious and drove Syrax back to stop the atrocities of the sheep thieves. Rhaegar was indeed anxious at this moment. Rhaegar was fighting with Vermithor in the sky, and you could tell from the sound that the battle was fierce. She wanted to go up to help, but was held back by the sheep thief. Silently praying that the black dragon can defeat Vermithor and bring Rhaegar back safely, just as he was thinking about it, there was a loud noise in the sky. Boom! That I saw a giant bronze beast falling from the sky, roaring with all its might, accompanied by majestic green dragon flames. Wormizar was seriously injured, and blood was constantly flowing from his neck, tail, and wings. Rhaegar controlled the glutton, pressing Vermithor down in a swooping posture to spray dragon flames, preventing it from turning over. When the chase reached midair, Rhaegar issued a stop command. Gluttony held back its dragon flames and slowly flapped its wings to slow down. Wormizar had considerable combat experience and quickly flapped his wings to slow down his fall. Finally, it smashed through the ebb and flow of the sea with a thud and fell into the sea. The dragon's blood instantly dyed a large area of sea water red, and the scalding temperature caused the sea surface to boil. There was a gurgling bubble sound. Hiss. After a while, a ferocious dragon's head broke through the sea, breathing heavily. The sea water stirred, and Wormizar flapped his wings and crawled toward the beach with difficulty. It was covered with wounds all over its body, but fortunately no vital parts were hurt. Using both wings and feet, he rescued a life from the sea. By the time it landed back ashore, it was already too tired to move. It lay limply on the swollen beach, its eyes gasping for breath. Above, Rhaegar overlooked the scene. Dragons are precious resources and cannot be killed out of whim. He stroked Glutton's dark scales and said happily, "Glutton, we have revenge." Hiss. The glutton held his head high, his green vertical pupils full of pride, and his body was tumbling up and down as he traveled back and forth, while roaring wildly. The green dragon flames drew streaks of color in the sky. The huge body is exceptionally flexible, as if dancing a victory dance. At this moment, it is the overlord of Dragonstone Island, having severely damaged Vermithor and Silverwing successively. Dragonstone could no longer threaten its existence. "Dragonstone, your prince is back." Rhaegar was in high spirits and cheered loudly in a childlike voice. It's as much a celebration of gluttony as it is a recognition of strategy. Although he was happy, Rhaegar did not forget to lower his head and look in the direction of Rhaegar. His expression slightly changed. "Glutton, go help." The glutton's fighting power is very strong. In the setting of this book, due to the wild dragon, its body is slightly larger than that of Vermithor and Silverwing at the same time. The glutton's talents are focused on speed and dragon flame intensity. For war and dragon fighting, these two aspects are crucial. It will be on the shelves next Friday. Friends who are following it, I hope to be rewarded with a first order, crab. Chapter 97 The Sorrow of the Sheep Stealer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dragon Flame. With a clear voice, Rhaegar steered Syrax to fight against the sheep stealers. After several interruptions, the sheep thief finally failed to have a full meal and continued the pursuit. Rhaegar was addicted to the battle and could not extricate herself. She commanded Syrax based on her feelings, and fought back and forth with the mud dragon. The two dragons, one chasing and the other fleeing, breathed dragon flames in mid-air to attack, reaching a stalemate for a while. after a while, the sheep thief pretended to give up tracking and turned towards the silver wing on the ground. Rhaegar hurried back with the dragon, and tried to stop her by breathing dragonfire again. The sheep thief had been waiting for this moment. As soon as Syrax approached, he immediately turned around and spit out a large mouthful of dragon flames, showering them like fireworks towards one person and one dragon. Syrax, get out of the way. That the situation reversed in an instant. Rhaegar's expression changed drastically, and she drove Syrax to turn around. Syrax hurriedly stopped flying, and the orange dragon flame had arrived. It was obviously too late to escape at this moment. The hot dragon flames rushed towards his face. Syrax tried his best to roll back to protect Rhaegar on his back from harm. Hiss. The next second, its chest and abdomen were sprayed by dragon flames, and it howled in pain. Syrax had never experienced combat before, and when he encountered pain, he was immediately at a loss and found it difficult to maintain his balance. The body fell downwards, flapping its wings in an effort to adjust. This also fully exposes its weaknesses. The sheep thief's eyes flashed, and he rushed forward eagerly, intending to bite off its neck. Rhaegar had a chain around her waist that kept her from falling from the saddle. But the oppressive feeling of weightlessness made her uneasy. The sheep thief arrived in an instant, and she could only witness the greedy dragon rushing towards him, pinning Syraxen down, tearing and biting him. She looked back down below her. After being pinned and bitten by the sheep thief, Syrax will fall to the ground. By then, she will not be able to escape disaster. Hiss. When his life was hanging by a thread, a high-pitched dragon roar resounded in all directions, and a huge black dragon fell from the sky. The strong wind swept by the dragon wings made her unable to open her eyes. She only saw the black dragon belonging to her younger brother roaring towards him, and a pair of sharp dragon claws inserted into the sheep thief's back. Hiss. The sheep thief screamed, and was hit hard without any defense, his skin and flesh torn and pierced. The glutton is Rhaegar. The hot dragon's blood dripped from her cheeks. Rhaegar was slightly absent-minded, staring at the figure on the black dragon's back. Hold it and take it away. Rhaegar's angry voice sounded, followed by the chilling sound of flesh being ripped open. The glutton grabbed the sheep thief's ribs with a pair of dragon claws, cruelly split the dragon's snout, flapped its wings and lifted it up. The sheep thief suddenly felt a wave of pain, screamed in horror, and flapped his wings to take off. Without the suppression of the sheep thief, Syrax hurriedly twisted his body and turned over before falling. At the same time, the glutton was teasingly dragging the sheep thief all over the place. No matter how hard this mud dragon struggled, it couldn't break free. Rhaegar's eyes never left Rhaegar's direction. Seeing Syracuse resume flying, he was greatly relieved. He didn't know how Rhaegar came to fight with the sheep thief, but it didn't matter. Fortunately, he arrived in time, otherwise he would have lost a relative. After thinking about this, Rhaegar stared angrily at the sheep thief. He said sternly, "Glutton, throw it into the sea." Hiss. The glutton neighed in response, flew to the sea with the rather large sheep thief, and released his claws. The restraints disappeared, and the sheep thief flapped his wings, trying to fly away. Boom! Green dragon flames poured out like a torrent, overwhelmingly hitting its head, burning it and making it scream. Plop! The second dragon fell into the water. Today, the sheep thief was thrown straight into the sea. He choked on a large amount of water while struggling wildly and was in a state of embarrassment. The glutton didn't just leave. Rhaegar steered it as it hovered above. Whenever the sheep thief climbs out of the sea, it will blow out dragon flames to knock it back. Dragons are creatures of fire and are very unaccustomed to water, and drowning can be fatal. The sheep thief drank a lot of sea water, and after struggling fiercely, he gradually became weak and howled for mercy. Seeing this, Rhaegar patted Glutton's back and said calmly, "Let's go, Glutton." Hiss. The glutton growled in displeasure, turned around and flew away reluctantly. It originally wanted to drown the mud dragon so that it could have a feast later, but when the driver spoke, it still respected it. Scanning the shore with disdain, the sheep thief wriggled like a loach and struggled to climb up the beach. On the other side of the beach, where Mizar has disappeared, the tide washes away the devastation it left behind. Rhaegar also discovered this and hurried back to find Rhaegar. "Rhaegar, I'm here." Just as they flew to the cliff, Rhaegar's cry came. Rhaegar lowered his head and saw Syrax falling to the ground, and Rhaegar with messy hair standing aside and waving to him. Not far away, the seriously injured Silver Wing also disappeared. Glutton, land. When the glutton landed, Rhaegar slid down one of the dragon wings and hurried towards Rhaenyra. The two long calves were soaring very fast. He rushed into Rhaenyra's arms and said anxiously, "Are you okay?" Rhaenyra shook her head, her face flushed with excitement, and said softly, "I'm fine, Syrax blocked the dragon flames for me." Rhaegar's tense face softened upon hearing this. He buried his head in her belly, and said in a muffled voice, "You scared me to death. You even said that I was messing around and I almost lost my life." Rhaenyra held his back with one hand and rubbed his head with the other, her eyes full of apology. "I want to help you, but that brown dragon wants to eat the silver wings." "Where are the silver wings?" Rhaegar raised his head and asked casually. "Wormizor climbed up from the cliff just now and flew away with his silver wings." Rhaenyra was breathing rapidly and was a little scared. "Next time you encounter a dragon, you should stay far away," Rhaegar said with a serious face. Rhaenyra's face froze, and she said awkwardly, "This is just my first time fighting, and you are so young." "No. But my dragon is very big, far greater than your Syracuse." Rhaegar was a little angry. On the one hand, he dares to engage in dragon fighting because he is brave, on the other hand, it all depends on the glutton's large size and brave temperament. Now that Vormithor and Silverwing have been defeated, looking at the entire continent of Westeros, except for Vhagar, the only remaining dragon in the generation, I am afraid that no dragon can be its opponent. Syracuse was less than 20 years old, just a young dragon that had passed through its infancy. There is no comparison between the two. After being taught a lesson by her brother, Rhaenyra knew that facts spoke louder than words, and if she lost, thanks to Rhaegar for his timely rescue. She knelt down, face to face with Rhaegar, pressed her cheek against his, and whispered, "You are right, Rhaegar." Rhaegar hugged her neck, rubbed his cheeks together, and said in a soft voice, "I miss you very much, sister. Where did you go after that night? My father and I were worried about you." Rhaenyra buried her head in Rhaegar's shoulder. When he mentioned his experience on the peninsula, Rhaegar's face fell and he muttered, "I fell into the den of savages. They are all idiots and have no meaning at all." Among the dragons of the dragon family, Balerion, the Black Death, is recognized as the strongest. The weakest ones are hard to tell. At this stage, I personally think that Sheep Thief and Grey Shadow are dragons with low talent. Chapter 98 The Queen's Conscience. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The two siblings exchanged sentences with each other, telling each other's experiences. Not long after, a group of guards arrived. Rhaegar, Rhaenyra, Viserys, who looked haggard, pushed aside the guards gathered in front of him and trotted to a pair of children at a very fast pace. "Father," Rhaegar exhaled loudly and looked at his father happily, but Rhaenyra was still leaning against him, and he could not embrace his father. Rhaenyra turned around when she heard the sound and called out in a low voice, "Father." She carried the king's guard on her back and sneaked out through the secret passage in the bedroom. Now that he was hit by his father, he felt a little cowardly. "Oh, very good, I'm glad you're okay, Rhaegar." Viserys did not respond to his daughter's call, but ran to Rhaegar and squatted down, looking up and down in surprise. He knew that his eldest son would be fine. "I will definitely come back safely." It turns out that the dream he had was accurate. Seeing her father being so excited, Rhaenyra consciously gave way to Rhaegar and stood aside silently. Viserys immediately hugged his eldest son, kissed his forehead hard, and said with satisfaction, "Rhaegar, when the dragon roar sounded on the island, I knew you were back." Rhaegar wiped the saliva from his forehead and showed off his achievements. "Glutton and I defeated Vermithor and Silverwing. There is no dragon on the island that can be our opponent." "How bold you are, kid." Hearing the words of his eldest son, Viserys had a sad look on his face, and his tone was indescribable with relief and helplessness. Since the eldest son recovered, everything has been fine, only his courage is growing day by day. First, he tamed the dragon without permission, then he controlled the dragon to fight. Now that he has just returned from outside, he fights 2 adult dragons at his doorstep. When he gets older, I can't imagine what shocking things he will do. Viserys' mind was full of thoughts, and he said with relief on his face, "It doesn't matter, you were never an ordinary child, Rhaegar." At this moment, he believed from the bottom of his heart that Rhaegar was the prince prophesied in the Song of Ice and Fire. Just like this time, Rhaegar was able to tame the largest wild dragon in history at a young age, and defeated the Bronze Fury and Silver Wings who were famous throughout the continent. Let's go, I've prepared a grand banquet and am waiting for you to come home. After rubbing his eldest son's head affectionately, Viserys picked him up with joy. As he walked, he turned back to Rhaenyra and said, "You didn't obey my orders, Rhaenyra." "I'm sorry, father." Rhaenyra bowed her head and apologized, explaining, "I'm very worried about Rhaegar's safety, I can't just wait." "Forget it, this isn't the first time you've disobeyed my orders." Viserys shook his head and said indifferently, "Let's go back together, you look very nervous." "Yes, father." Rhaenyra looked at the two people, a loving father and a filial son, with a flash of disappointment in her eyes. Inside the castle, after washing up, the siblings sat at the long table in the hall. Rhaegar talked about the trip to the peninsula with great enthusiasm. Viserys held the goblet, looked at the eldest son kindly, and listened patiently to the story. Until he talked about resurrecting the Shadowbinder's head and using the mask to defeat the curse, his face changed slightly and became a little heavy. In his opinion, magic, like dragons, is a dangerous thing. In particular, the curse of resurrecting dead heads and constantly killing people is a despicable product that he is extremely repulsive and shameless about. The Bren family and the Kleb family seem to have to send someone to investigate. With a calm expression on his face, Viserys was mentally calculating the details of the two families. Rhaegar spoke enthusiastically, but saw that his father and sister remained silent, and he was a little disappointed. He thought the stories were already exciting, why didn't they respond at all? After thinking for a while, he revealed the allegiance of the peninsula's nobles and the 2,000 free people who followed him across the sea. Viserys' expression suddenly changed. Rhaenyra pursed her lips, picked up the wine glass on the table and took a sip. Rhaegar realized something was wrong and stopped talking. "I'm late, are you all ready?" Alicent's voice sounded just in time, breaking the moment of silence. The three of them turned around. Alicent walked down the stairs, holding the baby in one hand and holding Helena in the other. Aegon followed behind her, guarded by the maid. Viserys hesitated and then said to Rhaegar, "There are quite a few free people who have followed you. I will order people to transport them to the vicinity of the Kingswood first to provide sufficient supplies. Whenever you decide how to use them, it will be up to you." Rhaegar nodded, "No problem, father." While father and son were talking, Alicent walked down the stairs and sat down on the other side of the long table. She looked at Rhaegar with joy and said with emotion, "Blessed by the 7 gods, you can come back safely, Rhaegar. Elder brother." Helena stood on the chair and called happily. She hasn't seen her brother for a long time. Rhaegar smiled at Helena and responded to Alicent, "Thanks to the glutton for protecting me, I am safe." "That wild dragon?" Alicent looked confused and crossed his hands in front of him. "From the moment I tamed it, it was no longer a wild dragon." Rhaegar emphasized. Alicent smiled apologetically, "Yes, you are very brave, taming an adult dragon alone. Unlike Aegon, he is still trying to get Sunfire to obey his orders, but has not succeeded." "Mother!" Aegon shouted, his brows knitted together. Rhaegar glanced at Aegon, his eyes falling on Alicent's hand. Those hands were not pretty. Alicent received an aristocratic education from an early age and believed in doing things by himself, whether it's tailoring clothes or reading and writing. These are compulsory courses for the Hightower family. This also caused her hands to be a little rough, not pampered and soft. At this moment, Alicent probably didn't realize that she was picking the nails of her right hand with her left hand. He dug so hard that blood seeped out from between his fingers. Rhaegar also noticed that almost all of her fingers had scratches. Some are new and some are old, but none are healed. Rhaegar, who had frequent contact with the Maester, knew that these injuries were all new, caused in the past few days. Rhaegar hesitated and said, "Your Majesty the Queen, your hand." "Ah." Alicent was startled for a moment, until he followed Rhaegar's gaze and landed on his hand. Then he put his hand away in panic. Sanson smiled and said, "Sorry, my hands are a little itchy. Maybe it's because Dragonstone Island is relatively humid. Keep warm." Rhaegar said casually, which was even more strange. Dragonstone is indeed humid, but as a city by the sea, King's Landing is no drier than Dragonstone. Alicent's explanation is too far-fetched. The expression he showed was also weird and nervous, being seen through his nervousness. Alicent quickly changed the subject and ordered his servants, "Isn't the banquet ready?" Let's bring it up quickly. Viserys nodded in agreement. Rhaegar leaned closer to Rhaenyra and whispered, "Why does Alicent pick his fingers?" As her former best friend, Rhaenyra certainly knew the reason and whispered, "Alicent's bad habit is that he likes to pick his fingers when he is nervous, which always results in bleeding." Nervous? Rhaegar repeated silently, "Why do people get nervous? Fear, excitement. Or, guilty. Vengeance must be avenged, and those who should be caught will be caught. It will be available on the shelves next Friday. Everyone, remember to reward a first order." Chapter 99 Find the Real Murderer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why is she afraid, even guilty? Rhaegar kept thinking about this in his mind. You can't possibly be worried about him, right? Based on his understanding of Alicent, the other party was probably hoping that he would never come back. Aegon lost a brother in front of him, so he could better compete with Rhaenyra for the right to be the heir. Plates of exquisite meals were placed on the table, and the family dinner officially began. Rhaegar picked out a few pieces of his favorite snacks, but when he put them in his mouth, they were like chewing wax. Rhaenyra noticed that he was distracted, nudged him with her elbow and asked, "What are you thinking about?" Rhaegar frowned, suddenly stood up from his seat, and shouted, "Father! What's wrong, Rhaegar?" Viserys wondered. Rhaegar looked serious and asked, "Father, why do people become so afraid that they feel guilty?" Viserys' eyes flashed slightly. He put down the knife and fork in his hand, and said, "Criminals who violate the law will be afraid when they are not arrested, and will feel guilty when they are interrogated." "Very good." Rhaegar nodded in agreement and said in a different voice, "The night I left, I was attacked by 2 dragons. The reason was that someone fed the glutton a dragon egg laid by Silverwing. Who did this, or in other words, who instigated it?" The joy of family reunion did not go to Rhaegar's mind. He was always mindful of the dangers he was being designed into. When he comes back this time, he must catch the mastermind behind the scenes and make him pay the price. After Rhaegar said these words, the scene suddenly became silent. Rhaenyra looked at Rhaegar in surprise, her eyes in disbelief. She had suspected the reason why the 2 dragons besieged the glutton, but she had been worried about Rhaegar's safety and hadn't thought about it carefully. When Rhaegar brought this up, she immediately realized that someone was plotting to kill her brother. Viserys' expression darkened and he said solemnly, "I have been investigating this matter since you disappeared. The guard who fed the dragon eggs was killed and his body was dumped on the beach. But don't worry, the matter is still being investigated, and I will definitely give you justice." Leonor said solemnly, "Before I tamed the glutton, someone tricked me into entering Longshan." "Who did it?" "Those 2 guards didn't know anything. The Huanlong people who misrepresented the news were transferred in advance and there was no way to start." Viserys looked grim, feeling guilty for not finding out the truth. Rhaegar added, "When I was escaping from Vermithor and Silverwing, I was attacked by a 3rd dragon, a scarlet dragon flame." Boom. Upon hearing this, Viserys stood up instantly, with a ferocious expression on his face, and slammed his hands on the table. "Are you sure, it's the scarlet dragon flame?" he asked word for word. Rhaegar said firmly, "I will never be wrong." Viserys' eyes were bloodshot, and his heart was filled with anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "Demon! You beast! There are only a handful of Targaryen dragons. There are only 2 dragons with scarlet dragon flames, Calaxio and Melias. Melias's master is his cousin Rhaenys Targaryen. Rhaenys once competed with him for the right to inherit the Iron Throne, and was known to the world as the uncrowned queen, but he knew in his heart that his cousin had the most upright character. Honor is everything. He would never do anything to murder the king's heir. On the other hand, his brother Daemon, who had just been driven out of King's Landing by him, was full of anger and hatred, combined with factors such as sneaking into Dragonstone Island, bribed the dragon people, and knowing the secret passages. The finger points directly at Daemon. "It must be him, because I didn't agree to marry Rhaenyra to him, so he came to kill my child." Viserys was instantly furious and his whole body was shaking violently. "Viserys, watch your body." Alicent hurriedly walked to him and comforted him worriedly. Viserys pushed her away and roared, "Come here, tell the maester to send a message to King's Landing, and immediately post a wanted order for Daemon's arrest, life or death." Harold, who was guarding the door, reminded, "Your Majesty, Prince Daemon has a dragon to help him." Posting notices may alert the enemy. It is better to send a message to the valley first. He may be hiding in Runestone City. Okay. Not only the valley, but also the masters from all over the free trade castle. As long as someone catches Daemon, they can receive gold equivalent to their weight. Viserys roared with what little sanity he had left. Father, calm down and take care of yourself. After analyzing the real culprit behind the scenes, Rhaegar's expression softened and he was a little worried about his father's condition. Viserys looked directly at him and said solemnly, "Father will definitely help you seek justice, for sure." Rhaegar turned his head and glanced at Alicent who was standing beside him, and swallowed back what he wanted to say. My father is in a very bad state at the moment. His suspicions were just suspicions. I believe you, father. Rhaegar smiled and sat back down. Viserys was still angry and was no longer in the mood for the banquet, so he left the banquet and returned to his room. Alicent quickly followed and ordered his servants to take care of a table of children. The two adults left. The family dinner exists in name only. Seeing his parents disappear around the corner of the stairs, Aegon was the first to jump off the chair and leave quickly. He didn't want to eat with his half-sister and brother. Especially my brother, he hates it the most. Helena watched blankly as her brother Aegon walked away, sitting where she was without knowing why. She didn't understand why her father and brother Rhaegar were angry over a few words, but she knew that when she was hungry, she had to eat. Taking a sneak peek at Rhaegar and Rhaenyra, who had ugly faces, she tried to reduce her presence as much as possible, chewing the cake on the plate in small bites. As for Aemond, he was still sleeping soundly. In his wet nurse's arms, in the strange atmosphere, Rhaenyra was the first to speak. She took Rhaegar's wrist and said seriously, "Did you disappear because you were attacked by demon?" 80% he did it, Rhaegar replied. Rhaenyra let go of her hand, clenched her fists, and said with a cold face, "This bastard, has he lost all honor and disgrace for the sake of the throne? Don't worry, he will take responsibility for his actions." Rhaegar said softly. "He attacked you, he wanted to kill his nephew." Rhaenyra hated it very much. She was complaining about her brother. She was also burying her uncle who had cared for her since childhood in her memory. Since the last abduction incident, Daemon's impression has deteriorated sharply in her eyes. Now she even dares to murder her brother. My former uncle has completely fallen. Now there is only one madman left. At night, silence fell in the castle. Viserys locked himself in his room and drank heavily until he was drunk. After the banquet, everyone went back to their rooms. Alicent failed to persuade her husband and had no intention of disciplining the children, so she returned to her room to rest. She lay on the soft bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. She was thinking about the day's events. Rhaegar's initial suggestion of guilty conscience touched her greatly. Even if it was revealed that the murderer was Daemon and she was not implicated, it still made her very uneasy. With such thoughts, how could she fall asleep easily? Thanks to the big grey cat for the 100 points reward. Thanks to Nanfang Yomu for the 100 reading points. Chapter 100 Warning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With random thoughts in his mind, Alicent gradually got a headache, closed his eyes and lamented silently. Time passed and sleepiness set in. She was half asleep in a light sleep. Dong dong dong. Suddenly, there was a noise in the room. Alicent had a severe headache. He thought it was a rat and didn't pay attention. Soon, the noise disappeared. Alicent was drowsy, almost asleep. I don't know how long it took. Alicent suddenly felt a little stuffy. It felt like I was standing next to a fireplace, with hot sweat pouring out of my forehead. It's so hot, I'm thirsty. Alicent's mouth was dry due to the heat, and he wanted to take the water glass on the bedside table in a daze. After groping around randomly, she couldn't find the water glass in the familiar location. Instead, I felt a layer of fabric. After pinching it, the fabric is light and thin, and the soft flesh behind the fabric can be pinched. Fabric, soft flesh. Alicent, who was unconscious, suddenly woke up, opened his eyes and looked at the head of the bed. In the dim environment, she saw a figure wearing a black robe, who seemed to be sitting beside the bed. In the figure's hand, she held a coal stove, hanging above her head. Who are you? Extreme fear deeply stimulated Alicent, causing her to move back and clutch the quilt to cover her body. It's me, Your Majesty the Queen. A familiar voice came, and the figure took off his hood and handed her a glass of water. Your water. Hearing the childish voice, Allison widened his eyes and tried to see the face of the person coming, staring at the boy beside the bed in disbelief. He exclaimed, "It's you, Rhaegar. Are you scared, Your Majesty?" Rhaegar was wearing a black robe and looked at his stepmother calmly. Allison suddenly changed his face and scolded, "Why are you in my room? You should go to bed at this time." For just a moment, she thought it was some guy who had sneaked into her bedroom again. She was so frightened that she almost died. Rhaegar held the water glass, tilted his head and said, "Aren't you thirsty? Want to drink some water first?" "No. I'm not thirsty at all. Come out, do you hear me?" Allison was very angry and scolded him mercilessly. "Huh, forget it if you don't drink." Rhaegar shook his head, put down the water glass, and said politely, "I will leave soon. Before that, I want to have a chat with you." "There's nothing to talk about. How did you break into my room? Where are the guards at the door?" Allison wanted to throw this stepson out at the moment. Rhaegar chuckled, pointed to a wall in the living room, and said, "Isn't there a secret passage in your room? You will know it after a little inquiry." After the family dinner, he went to Cole and asked what happened on Dragonstone during this time. "There are several secret passages in the castle, one of which leads to the Queen's room." The side confirmed some of his conjectures, so he came tonight. Following Rhaegar's direction, Allison thought of the secret passage that was being closed. She subconsciously clenched the sheets tightly, her eyes flashed in panic, and she said uneasily, "What do you mean? What do you want to say to me?" Rhaegar stared at her quietly, feeling his stepmother's resistance. He told a story. "I just wonder why there are always some twists and turns in my dragon training experience. Daemon bribed the dragon people to spread false news and mislead me into breaking into Dragon Mountain. Before this, someone had conveyed similar information to me, but it was directed to the East Coast." Allison's expression changed slightly and he said angrily, "It's the information I shared with Rhaegar. The two young dragons are indeed haunting the East Coast. Young Yen was found early. I didn't lie. As you said, the intelligence from the East Coast is indeed true." Rhaegar sighed, but the grey shadow at that time appeared in Longshan. The dragon that was supposed to appear was not a glutton, but a silver wing in the sensitive period after laying the dragon egg. "Speaking of which, is there a possibility that someone knows that I don't trust her and deliberately throws out irrelevant information to guide me to Longshan?" Rhaegar's voice was very soft, teasing Allison's nerves in the dim room. Allison's face turned cold when he heard this, and he said in a cold voice, "This is all your imagination. It was Demon who framed you. I just want to ease the relationship with Rhaegar. We are the best sisters." "No problem, what you said makes sense." Rhaegar nodded, not rejecting her words. "He is not here tonight to ask questions, because there is no substantial evidence against Her Majesty the Queen. It was all just his suspicion." Rhaegar lowered his head, placed the portable coal stove on the bed, and gently opened the lid. The red coals were exposed to the air, and the bright firelight dispersed a corner of darkness. At the same time, it also illuminates half of Rhaegar's cheeks hidden in the shadows. "What are you up to?" Seeing this scene, Allison couldn't help but become nervous as he thought of certain memories. "It's okay. If you don't want to drink water, just get warm." Legia's voice was calm, and he stretched out his hand to pinch a piece of hot coal. Holding it calmly in his hand, he raised his hand and placed it between the two of them. The charcoal in his hand burst into flames, illuminating the intersection between them. Rhaegar's eyes were indifferent and he said calmly, "Your Majesty the Queen, do you know that my trip to the peninsula was not peaceful this time? Many people disrespected me and their lives were taken away by dragon flames." Allison stepped back silently, until he retreated to the other side of the bed, fear appearing on his beautiful face. Rhaegar did not come closer and continued, "I don't know if you are involved in something, but I hope you can put down your prejudice against me, or ignore it, or just be calm. The only thing is, don't hurt me, including my father and sister." As he spoke, Rhaegar raised his head and stared at the stepmother. Click. He closed his palms and crushed the charcoal into pieces, scattering it onto the white bed. The crushed charcoal instantly ignited the sheets. Allison screamed in fright and quickly grabbed a pillow nearby and patted the burning flames. Rhaegar did not stop him, but instead picked up the water cup that had been put down long ago, sprinkled it evenly on the burning coals, and extinguished them one by one. Zila, Fick. White smoke floated up, and Rhaegar's face was hidden behind the smoke, and he whispered, "I hope you will remain kind, Your Majesty the Queen." "What on earth are you going to do?" "I haven't done anything." "How many times do you want me to say it?" The flames deeply stimulated Alicent, bringing her to the verge of collapse and roaring angrily. Rhaegar turned a blind eye and said, "I believe what you say, because you are my stepmother and you will protect the children in your name from harm, including me and Rhaegar. Of course, I am the queen, your father's wife, and I have this responsibility." Alicent looked extremely ugly and almost growled. "But you shouldn't be so rude to your mother. If you break into my room and threaten me with fire, I will tell your father exactly what happened. Let him decide how to teach children who disrespect their elders." "As you wish, Your Majesty the Queen." Rhaegar didn't care, closed the lid of the coal stove, picked it up again, turned around and left. Just after taking 2 steps, he seemed to remember something. He turned around and said suddenly, "By the way, Aegon is my brother. I cherish this family relationship very much. It's my ability to break out of the murder. But he is still very immature." "That's enough, don't say any more." Alicent interrupted him, frowned, his eyes were red, and he gritted his teeth and said, "I will take good care of my children, all of them." "Very good, mother." Rhaegar smiled cutely and bowed like a cute little child. Under the hateful gaze of her stepmother, she slowly walked out of the bedroom carrying the coal stove, opened the entrance to the secret passage and left. Alicent is a typical poor person with a hateful quality. She is a victim of worldly rules and family, a stark contrast to Rhaegar, who wants to escape the world and change the rules. Now, Rhaegar's appearance will crush her strong attitude against Rhaegar in the original book.